Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills and the Blood TV. It has been 9 days since Gills' relegation, from Sky Bet League 1 to Sky Bet League 2 was sadly confirmed. That 2-0 defeat at home to Rotherham on the final day of the season saw us drop down and also saw our visitors on the day promoted to the Championship. But on Monday, the club did finally release their retain list upon the conclusion of the 2021-22 season. I'm joined by a familiar face, I'm sure you all know, EFL expert and general nice guy, Gabe Sutton, to have a chat. Obviously, I'm going to put my 2 pennies in, but I wanted to get an outsider's perspective of those that are still under contract, that might not still be here, though, come first game of the season, those that have been offered contracts, and those that have been let go. Gabe, first of all, appreciate you coming on. This is quite a late record. It is 20 past 10, Tuesday evening. Playoffs are out the way, League One playoffs, so I don't have to talk about them anymore. It's not relevant to me, unfortunately. You good, though?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Matt. Always lovely to chat, so thanks for having me.
No, appreciate your time. Right, let's get straight into it. We'll start with players under contract. Now, we all saw Neil Harris's interview immediately after the Rotherham defeat back on the 30th of April. There was a little bit of confusion about what he said. It seemed at first he said there were 7 players under contract, none of them were going to be playing for him next season. I think he then backtracked a little bit and said there were 7 under contract, not all of them will play for him next season. Now, the retain list has come out. 7 players under contract, and Max Amar, David Tatonda, Ollie Lee, Ben Reeves, Alex MacDonald, Stuart O'Keefe, and youngster Henry Woods, who's not been seen at all this season in the first team. So we'll go 1 player at a time. Max Amar first, 300 appearances for the club, brought that up last couple of games of the season. I think it was the Portsmouth fixture when he brought up that milestone. Can you see Max Amar being in Neil Harris's team come the opening day of the season, or do you think he's potentially one that's in danger of the chop still?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I felt like you could see that Neil Harris was talking a little bit on emotion after that final day defeat to Rotherham, and maybe that was perhaps how the words were misconstrued. So he said none of them will be playing for me next season, when he meant sort of some of them, but it was that probably. And I think if you're a Gillingham fan, that's kind of what you want to see in a manager, isn't it? You want to see someone who's got that little bit of passion about them, and someone that's going to call things out, and the structural issues that the club may get onto that at some point. But I think in terms of Max Amar, you messaged me recently, kind of alluding to the fact that he's been relegated with Bristol Rovers last season. Gas fans aren't quite so keen on him, and obviously relegated with Gillingham this year. Now, that doesn't have to define a player, but it's probably not the greatest indication either. I've always felt, I don't know what you think, Matt, about Max Amar, but he's a good defender if you've got a dominant centre-back alongside him. But I don't know if he can be a dominant centre-back himself, and maybe that's something that Neil Harris could be interested in looking at. Mark Beavers has been released by Peterborough. It's someone Neil Harris had previously at Millwall, so whether he'd be after someone like that with a bit of experience to come in there, that could be an option.
Yeah, I noticed. I don't know if he's been released, but he's at least been made available for transfer. Someone to certainly keep an eye on, but obviously we don't spend a lot of money on anybody, so it'd be
whether you could pick him up on a free, or
whether we can persuade him to have his contract torn, that would be something like that. But yeah, it's certainly one at 32 years of age. You think he'd still be able to do a job in the 4th tier, so it'd be something to keep an eye on. But Max Amar, for me, I wouldn't be heartbroken if he does start the first game, whoever that's against, come end of July, I think, isn't it, this year, because we start a bit early because of the World Cup. Yeah. But again, we can't get away from the fact that it is back-to-back relegations, and no footballer at any standing, professional, semi-professional, wants that on their CV. It's not a good advert for, come and let me play for your football club, unfortunately. So I'm sort of on the fence with Max Amar, I think would be the fairest thing to say. So we'll move on to the next one, David Tatonda. Another one, sadly, back-to-back relegations, signed on a free transfer from Bristol Rovers by Steve Evans. And has followed the same pattern as Amar, unfortunately. Was an absolute accident waiting to happen first half of the campaign. Then he played himself into some form. Then he got an injury. Then he's been in and out the side. certainly improved under Neil Harris for me. I think everybody did. But let's be honest, the bar was incredibly low to start with. So we're not sitting here saying he's a very accomplished left back, left wing back at all. But there certainly were improvements. My big concern with David Tatonda is he was making mistakes that you'd expect like an 18, 19-year-old to be making, not someone that's 26. So for me, I'd be probably, if I had to be pushed, I'd be on the side of saying maybe he's one of the ones that Neil Harris wants to move on and get off the wage bill.
I think Neil Harris is going to be recruiting for a 4-4-2 next season. He's played 3-5-2 or a variation of that this season, because presumably that's the personnel that he's had. But I think he's been quite clear about the fact that he wants to recruit for a 4-4-2 because that's what he knows. That's what he did at Millwall with lots of success. And I'd just like to kind of look through the left backs Neil Harris has had previously in his career. I think in his first full season at Millwall, he had Joe Martin, who was very much a solid left back, liked a bit of a belter from distance. He scored
Former Gills player as well.
Oh, was he a Gills player as well? Yeah.
Yeah, he was with us when we won the League Two title, and for a couple of seasons afterwards, yeah.
Oh, I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, anyway, he's one who liked a bit of a belter from distance, but generally pretty solid. And then you go to the following couple of seasons, I think they had a lad called James Meredith, who was at Bradford City as well. Again, another solid left back, dependable, supported play, but didn't bomb forward. He'd make some intelligent runs, but he wasn't like he wasn't like a lower league Roberto Carlos or anything. Not that you'd
is that a thing? Is that a thing? I'm not sure that's a thing.
Anyway. Although he has been training, hasn't he, with some side in Shropshire, so you never know. But then he went to Cardiff and he had Joe Bennett, who again he's a tough tackler, solid left back. And I just think that with David Tatonda, I think there's probably too many question marks over him in terms of reliability. And I think the first thing Neil Harris will want is to drill that back four into shape, distances between units, don't give anything away, try and play with a high line if you can, but in a very sort of regimented way. And I just don't know, from what you said and what Gillingham fans have said about David Tatonda, not quite sure he necessarily fits into that. So I could see Tatonda being one of the ones where Neil Harris wants to give him the opportunity to move elsewhere.
Yeah, right. I'd have to agree with that as well. But then move on to a player who I really like, if played in the correct position, in my opinion. And in my opinion, he's not been played in the correct position for the final portion of the season. We had him on loan for the 2 seasons that Steve Evans was in charge, or at least half of the second season. And his numbers were really good in terms of goals and assists. I think he was double figures for both over a season and a half. So you're looking at 18 months. This season, he's been played as an orthodox central midfielder. If he was to be played there consistently, I'd say no. If he's to be played further forward in a number 10 role where he can get on the ball and try and get us into dangerous areas, then I'd be more inclined to keep him. That player is Ollie Lee.
Yeah, I think the issue that you've got, and I alluded to it earlier, if you're recruiting for a 4-4-2, then that role doesn't exist for Ollie Lee, and I think that's the crux of your problem. I don't think that the word tackle is in Ollie Lee's dictionary. Unfortunately, lots of good form, lots of quality. He's definitely got ability. That's never been the issue. But I think that if you're Neil Harris and you're trying to rebuild this club and change the values and change the culture and set higher standards, I think you've got to start with a group of players who exactly what you're going to get from every week. And I think that's the aim for Gillingham next season. More than actually challenging for promotion, I think it's actually just about getting the basics right. It's the same for a lot of teams that are coming down, but I think for Gillingham, the way Neil Harris likes to play, he'll want to get that template in place where you got the pressing from the 2 strikers and you got that aggression and you've got tight distances between units. And maybe if you can get that right and finish sort of top 10, top half this season, then you'd maybe try and add, well, can we push the envelope a little bit for 2 or 3 pieces of quality on top of that? But for me, I think it's about getting the basics right. And I don't think Ollie Lee is going to fit into that. And I think that if you're playing for Neil Harris' side as well, you've got to be willing to put a challenge in. You've got to have an old school dimension. I don't think Ollie Lee's got that. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, and I'd like to think that we'll have players that can play a 4-2-3-1 if need be, because we're going to have injuries and suspensions, which means we can't play a 4-4-2 all the time. And then he might come into contention to play. But the next player we're going to talk about is a very similar player. Missed a lot of the season, unfortunately, due to injury, but was probably one of our best players over the last few weeks of the season, was getting himself into good areas, scored a good goal at Cheltenham, couple of assists, I think, indirectly or directly as well. But like you say, if we're going to play 4-4-2, then if you want a player that can play as a 10, if we do switch systems up, then you don't need too many, because otherwise you're effectively wasting a wage, and we're not going to have loads of money to spend for starters. So that next player is Ben Reeves. So similar to Ollie Lee, technically very good, can pick a pass, left-footed, which I like. I think they're a good commodity to have at any level of football. But I suppose it's probably a case of either or. Neil Harris is probably looking at in terms of one of them two. I'd be more inclined to go with Ben Reeves at the moment, purely because I think he showed better form. Harris was playing him in what I'd say was his correct position, rather than what he was doing with Ollie Lee. My only concern with Ben Reeves is obviously that injury problems. They've been there for multiple seasons. It's not a new thing with Gillingham. At 29, 30, it would be a bit of a risk. But my point would be, they're both under contract. If I had to pick one of the two, I'd probably err towards Ben Reeves at the moment. But what are your thoughts on Ben Reeves? Can you see him fitting into this? I know he's played sort of from the side before in MK Dons teams and Plymouth teams and Charlton teams, not necessarily in a 4-4-2, maybe in a sort of narrow 4-2-3-1. Could you see a role for Ben Reeves in a Neil Harris football side?
Well, I kind of go back to sort of using the template for Neil Harris's previous sides, and at Millwall, I think he brought in Ben Marshall in the second half of their 17-18 campaign, and they kind of had Jed Wallace, who at the time was very much a classic winger, kind of attacking the right flank, and then they had Marshall on the left, who was more cutting inside and looping crosses to the back stick.
Which is what I think Reeves can do, being left-footed. You can play him from the right and he almost becomes an inverted winger from that side,
Yeah, because, I mean, you get it onto his left peg, and there's quality in there, isn't it? I
mean, definitely.
I got a lovely view of his curler at Cheltenham.
So did I.
I was a bit mental in there. I got a perfect view of the away end as well. It was absolutely mental, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But he's got quality in that left peg, whether it's a curled effort or whether you can maybe loop across to the back stick if you're bringing in a target man, which I imagine is going to be another area we might come to. I think he's got the quality. I think really the question mark is firstly the injuries and whether you're willing to take that chance on a wage for a player that isn't going to be able to play 40 plus games. We know that, so you'd want to kind of manage his minutes a little bit. And also the intensity element, whether he's going to be able to keep up with the pressing demands for a Neil Harris side. Because Harris sides, for me, at their best, it's high line, it's aggressive, it's never suffocating the opposition, never giving them any moment to breathe. Is Ben Reeves going to have that energy, that mobility to sort of adapt to that? Possibly not, or possibly in short bursts rather than for 90 minutes Saturday, Tuesday. So I think you're going to need to manage him carefully, but do I think he's got the qualities for League Two level? Yes, I do.
I guess you'd imagine whether it could almost boil down to whether Neil Harris thinks if he can give him a proper pre-season and get him fit in the summer, because he never seems, for me, Ben Reeves over the last few seasons, he's always been without a club. He's always been sort of a bit nomadic. So he's not really got a proper pre-season with any club. If Neil Harris says to him, we're going to play you 7 times out of 10 and build the team around you as much as possible, it might mean that, Ben Reeves thinks, right, I can settle here, rather than thinking, I'm on the periphery of the side. I'm not sure whether I'm going to play. And then if you can give him a proper pre-season, almost if you tailor a pre-season to what he needs, then he could become a player. But again, the question marks will always be whether he can play Saturday, Tuesday, which there is a lot of at League One and League Two level, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that, because I look at there's some players in League Two, like Johnny Williams, for example, at Swindon Town. I mean, Johnny Williams is too good a footballer for League Two in terms of ability. But Swindon, they've kind of managed him quite carefully. They've given him 60 minutes here, 20 minutes there. They've kind of sort of managed his minutes. And I think he's actually been okay with that, because he's not necessarily wanted to play 90 minutes every game. So I think sometimes...
But Williams is a fair bit older than Ben Reeves, though, isn't he? That would be the only sort of differential. Possibly. He's like 35, whereas Reeves is 30 probably still wants to play every week. But, you know, only time will tell. But, yeah, certainly have to agree in the sense that Ben Reeves, in terms of technical ability, I think would be a very good player in League Two if he can stay fit and he can and find a role.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that.
Right, we then move on to another injured player, unfortunately. I've had a chat with a few Gillingham fans about this game, so I want to get your thoughts on it. And I said, if it come down to this player and one other, who've both missed most of the season, or at least a large portion of the season, with fairly serious knee injuries, which probably gives you an idea of who I'm talking about. If I had to make a choice between this player and the other one, I'd have gone with the other one. And that other one would have been Danny Lloyd. I thought he was playing himself into some really good form, unfortunately, before he ruptured his ACL at Portman Road at the start of February. I thought he offered us a goal threat. He offered us that work rate and that intensity that you've spoken about that would thrive in a Neil Harris team. But it's been announced that he's not been offered a new deal for one reason or another, which I'm disappointed about, I won't lie. I think Lloydie was, like I say, was running into some really good form. And I think if he'd stayed fit for the rest of the season, we'd have probably found another point or two. But he's been released. The one player that is under contract, who I thought was very good last season, played predominantly wide left in that 4-2-3-1 that we played so very effectively with Dane Oliver through the middle, Ollie Lee in the 10, and Jordan Graham the other side, and that's Alex MacDonald. It's not. I'm not sure exactly what the injury is. I don't think it's not a ruptured ACL or anything like that. He just kept having an issue and was trying to get through it with cortisone injections, and then they said it's not working. You're going to have some type of surgery, which is never good. But MacDonald's a player that's thrived in League Two in recent seasons. We know that with Mansfield, with Oxford. Do you see Macca having a role in a Neil Harris side, or do you think he could be one that's still potentially at risk of being, given the chop because of the fact that 32 now, I think, and has missed a lot of football this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the 4-4-2 formation, I would say that maybe MacDonald is a more natural fit than Lloyd, because I think with MacDonald, he suits kind of tucking in as a midfielder and being part
Which
of
is
that.
what he did really well in that 4-2-3-1. Yeah, we almost became lopsided without the ball because he'd tuck in and make us compact and almost give us a 3 in the middle of the park out of possession.
Yeah, a bit like a James Milner almost.
Yeah. Similar,
level. Yeah.
We're making some out there comparisons tonight, aren't we? Brazilian left backs in League Two, James Milner and Alex MacDonald. Just what you get with these lower league chats.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, whereas I think, I get your point about Danny Lloyd, because clearly he played himself into some really good form, but I don't know. I sometimes think he's better in a 4-2-3-1, where you've got that option for him to really join in with the attack and almost become an inside forward, or sometimes play wide in the front three. Whereas I feel like with Alex MacDonald, he's probably more defensively tuned. He's played, I think, in a 4-4-2 under Steve Evans for Mansfield. Might have done a similar type of role at Burton Albion as well under Gary Rowett. So I think that sort of tucking in element might have worked. But he's only played 7 games this season as well, hasn't it? So I think there's a lot of question marks over that fitness element.
Yeah, totally agree. So time will only tell whether he is one that we look to. I mean, it'd be, in terms of leadership and experience at that level, I think he'd be a great player to start the season with, and experience and leadership brings us on to the next player. And I think it's fairly straightforward. This one, it's probably the most straightforward one out of the 7 that have been announced as still being under contract, and that was the player of the year from last season, Stuart O'Keefe, who for me is probably the player that we do build this team around in League Two. He's everything that you probably want in a League Two side. No disrespect to this level. I mean, I'm over the initial disappointment, heartbreak of relegation now. And I'm excited for what League Two will bring, in the sense that it'd be new grounds, different teams, different challenges, new battles. But you get teams in League One, you only have to look at the playoff game tonight between Sheffield Wednesday and Sunderland, 2 sides that are very good at getting the ball down. Barry Bannons, Patrick Roberts coming to the fore.
Pritchard.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Clark on loan from Tottenham. Players that, are probably playing at a level 2 low at least. Whereas League Two is going to be more robust. It's going to be more in your face. There's going to be a lot of, direct football. Not saying that teams can't play. I mean, you look at Swindon, and they play really good brand of football. Forest Green as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of teams, I would say, and shoot me down if I'm wrong, because obviously I'm learning about League Two very quickly now. A lot of teams probably do what, dare I say, we did under Steve Evans, which is get it into your front man really quick and then play from there once you've got there. That would be my assumption.
Yeah, I think there's a mixture really. I think that you've still got some really. I think you've mentioned a couple of really good footballing sides in Swindon and Forest Green, and I think the other thing is League Two clubs. They often seem to now go for under 23s coaches a little bit more, and sometimes. Funny enough, I was speaking to a manager from the National League South earlier and saying clubs don't seem to want to take a chance on sort of good managers in non-league, where it is a bit more aggressive, a bit more in your face, a bit more up and at them, and they prefer to go for coaches who have got really good contacts in the youth and under 23 circuit. So I do think that it's changing a little bit. However, you still see sides like Northampton Town who have had their success this season, just missing out on the playoffs, being very direct. You'd probably say Sutton United are very much a compact 4-4-2, and they go into Omar Bajil. I mean, he's quite a technical target man, if you like. He's, if you get him to his chest and feet, he can play people in behind, but again, they're very direct. Tranmere, I'd say, quite a direct side as well. So you get some direct sides. I'd say there's a fair sort of mix of different styles, really. And obviously, Steve Evans is going to be in the division next season with Stevenage, and no prizes for guessing what sort of style we'll see from his side.
It's got opening day written all over it, hasn't it?
I know, yeah, quite possibly. To be honest, I'm the other interesting thing is Stevenage up against Mansfield, because Steve Evans left Mansfield because he wanted to take this work opportunity in China, and then just coincidentally he rang Barry Fry, the Peterborough director, to ask for tickets for the match against Warsaw, and all of a sudden, before you know it, he was Peterborough manager. So that's just
no more to be said.
Yeah, exactly. No more to be said. This is completely above board, isn't it?
But no, and that wasn't. I mean, for any League Two fans that hopefully are watching, because I'm trying to get that portfolio of League Two content creators involved now with the channel. So if you are watching, please drop us a sub. I'm not too ashamed to plug it. It wasn't it wasn't a slight on League Two football or National League. I watched 2 National League games over the weekend. I watched Torquay versus Chesterfield. And there's some very good players in that Torquay side. I think
you've got this lad Connor Lemonhigh Evans on loan. I think he's supposed to be linked with Warsaw as well, like an attacking midfielder.
I'm not sure if that's the one I pointed out. There was a lad that was playing wide right, scored the second goal, I think. Is on loan from QPR. I can't think of his name. And there was also a centre attacking midfielder that caught the eye. Albie.
Ooh.
I'm trying to think. Scored 15 goals in the middle of the park this season as well. I can't think of his name. Is it Alfie Lloyd?
Ooh, you've caught me out of it there. But while you kind of look that one up, I think, Torquay have seemed to have done quite well in the loan market as well. They got a lad called Adam Randall from Plymouth Argyle, who's they did really well with him. And I think this lad Lemonhigh Evans is supposed to be. But then Stockport and Wrexham are the big ones. I mean, I think if you're a National League club, you'd probably want Wrexham to
Armani Little. Sorry, Gabe, to interject. Armani Little is the number 10 that plays for Torquay. I couldn't find him because I was looking at the Yeovil squad by mistake. Armani Little's the attacking midfielder, and I think it's Stephen Duke McKenna. I think he's the lad that's on loan from QPR. And we've got a decent, not that I'm saying he's going to join us, but we've got a decent sort of relationship with QPR. We had Masterson and Kelman in this season that's just finished. So, no, not for 1 second was it a slight. And obviously, I know it's slightly different. Wrexham, Stockport, which I watched on Sunday lunchtime, and I thought Wrexham were excellent. I thought Stockport were excellent for the first 20 minutes. Wrexham couldn't get the ball, but Stockport couldn't put it in the back of the net. But it's slightly different because of, obviously, we know they're well back. So they've essentially got very good League One players 2 divisions below the likes of.
They signed Ollie Palmer from Wimbledon in January, didn't they?
Palmer, Mullin up front. You'd go to Stockport. They got Paddy Madden. They got Andy Sarcevic. There's some very Ben Tozer playing for Wrexham, who's dropped down 2 divisions. So it's sort of it makes it a bit lopsided. But still some
Yeah.
very good football on display. And it makes you realise that Gills are not just going to come down and because we're one of the 4 that's dropped, we're going to automatically be in the top 7.
Well, do you know? I mean, I think that you look at the teams coming down, it's probably going to be quite a big rebuilding job for Olot, Crew Alexandra, Doncaster. Whereas actually, I think the title winner of the National League, whether that's Wrexham or Stockport, and if one of those sides goes up via the playoffs, I think you'd probably put them among the favourites to go again. So, yeah, it's going to be really competitive next season, I think.
Yeah, then you look at someone like Bradford, who they're going to give Mark Hughes money to spend as well.
Yeah.
Salford to chuck money at it again. Tranmere will be well backed. I think it'll be a very competitive league. Excuse me.
I'm led to believe Salford are maybe reviewing the managerial situation. I think they've got quite a big name linked up, lined up, so that could be certainly one to watch. So them and Bradford, I think you'd probably put among the favourites for next season, as well as whoever, by the way, drops out of the lose out in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, very true. Right. Anyway, we've gone off on a tangent.
I love a tangent.
Last one was Henry Woods, not seen a lot of. So for me, it's a case of it's low risk. I'm not really bothered one way or the other. It'd be interesting to see how he does in pre-season. But that's the players under contract. I've just had to notice that a Zoom limit's come up, even though I thought it was unlimited. But we shall crack on regardless. We've got 10 minutes left, it says. Players that have been offered contracts, then obviously the main ones were the ones that were staying. Players that have been offered contracts, 2 that jump off the page: Jack Tucker, Robbie McKenzie. Personally, I can't see Jack Tucker staying, and I'm not sure Robbie McKenzie will stay either. I'd love both of them to stay. I think they'll both be very good in League Two, but I think Jack Tucker, despite his standards dropping in this past season, but who didn't at Gillingham, and also I think Robbie McKenzie come out of the season was one of very few that come out of the season with credit, can play multiple positions.
Can I just pick your brains, Matt, on Jack Tucker? Because for me, I think if you put him in, and if MK Dons, for example, were to lose Harry Darling, they'd probably move that lad Warren O'Hora into the middle of the back 3, and then possibly bring in Jack Tucker with the money that they get for Twine and possibly Darling if they lose those 2 players. Do you think he'd adapt well to like a possession-based side? Because for me, I think he has got the ability on the ball. It's just that he's played under Steve Evans for 2.5 years, and then under Neil Harris, who's quite direct as well. So he's maybe been a bit unlucky that he probably hasn't been able to show what he can do on the ball, even if he might be pretty good at it.
Yeah, and you know, we all say if you play with better players, you become a better player yourself. So there's that natural development as well. He'll organically grow as a better ball playing defender. And yeah, I don't think he'd be uncomfortable in that. I mean, it'd take a while. You'd have to bear with him, but it's not to say that he'd go there and he'd walk straight into the first team. But yeah, I could see him doing that role. I think he's got enough ability. He's decent enough with both feet as well. He's not one of these defenders that solely uses one foot and uses his other as a stander. So yeah, I mean, and he's played in that system, albeit in a different way, the final part of the season, but it's essentially a 3-4-1-2 or a 3-4-2-1, which is what MK Dons play. So in terms of that, he'd settle into it. He plays the outside centre half role fairly well. Be an interesting one to see, and yeah, it'd certainly be you know, I know there's a lot of chat about MK Dons all the time because of, you know, just about how they came about, but they're a well-run club and they've got good players and they recruit well and they coach well, and yeah, I think it'd certainly be a move where he could further his career, and he'd probably still play a lot of games as well.
Yeah, I would think so. I wonder how much you'd be looking to get for him. Would you accept about £1 million for him?
Well, he's out of contract, so it'll go to tribunal, unfortunately. So.
Oh yeah, because he. Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, that'd be a shame if you lost him without getting a proper fee for him.
Yeah, so it depends. Obviously, we've offered a contract to almost cover our own backs because we know if we don't, then he could just walk away for absolutely nothing. Same with Robbie McKenzie. He's under 24.
That's good. Okay. So we might get something from a tribunal.
Yeah, so we get tribunal for both of them if they do decide to move on. I just hope we don't end up in a situation like we've done previously with Connor Ogilvie and Brandon Hannon the last 2 summers where they play 5 or 6 friendlies and then end up walking away. I get that we want to try and keep them, but I think Neil Harris gives the impression that he wants to get his business done early, and he don't want people hanging around if they're not committed from the off.
For me, I think this is such an important thing, Matt. I look at Exeter City, for example, and they've sold players, but they've sold them at the right fee. They haven't had to sort of take grab at the first offer, and they've got 7-figure fees for their players consistently, and they've got really good sell-on fees and various clauses and things like that. And for me, that's such a crucial thing because from fans' perspective, you don't want to lose your best players because you get excited about what you see on the pitch. You
Of
want
course.
to keep your best players around. Got naturally. But I think from a business perspective, sometimes you do have to maybe take a good offer for a player when they've got 2 years left on their contract rather than letting it roll on to their final year.
I think
And for
Peterborough
me,
do it well, don't they? Where they transfer list people in their last year of their contract if they're not willing to sign a deal, and it works really
Yeah.
well because they manage to make money on it, and then they can go and reinvest it, and they've done that fairly well as well, and go and pick people out of League Two, non-league, and then sell them on for a profit, and it works really well.
Yeah, they got a fair few quid for Suriki Dembele to Bournemouth, didn't they? So yeah, that's a good model, I think, because I think you've got to do that for the sustainability element. But I just don't think. I think Gillingham and maybe I don't know what you think about this without getting off topic too much. You may be missing a CEO. I mean, it's things like the structure of the club because Paul Scally, things are stagnating so much under Scally, and there's such a lack of leadership at the club apart from Neil Harris. And Harris, for me, you want to streamline Harris's work so he's not just so he can focus on what he does best as opposed to trying to fight everything all across all corners of the club, because it does feel like Harris is almost fighting the tide of the football club, and you can do that for a bit and you can stir things up, but there's got to come a point where the club takes responsibility for its own actions and gets the right things in place. And under Paul Scally, I'm not sure that's going to happen. So
No, and we've had this chat on WhatsApp, on Twitter, you know, when we've met up or we spoke on the phone, and there's only one person that can answer that question. I'll just celebrate the fact that we've got a head of recruitment at last. So we'll leave that chat for another day, I think, otherwise we will run out of time for sure.
Yeah, of course.
In terms, so that's the 2 out of contract players. I can't see Jack Tucker or Robbie McKenzie staying, unfortunately. Can you see either staying quickly?
No, I can't.
No, I can't either. And the other 2 that have been offered deals are 2 youngsters. That's Josh Chambers, young player, centre attacking midfielder, central midfielder who made his debut this season. Looks to have ability. I think Neil Harris likes him, and Bailey Haykhurst, the young left back, have both been offered contracts. For me, again,
he filled
it's
in
low
at
risk.
Jeff Wednesday, didn't he? Earlier in the season, he had a few games.
Haykhurst did, yeah. He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Set up the goal. He was involved in the goal as well, yeah. So for me, both low risk, could feature in League Two. So for me, it's a no-brainer. We try and keep them on it and see how they develop.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, briefly. Go on, carry on.
Well, yeah, I hopefully that you can produce some of these young players, and because I think it's always great when you've got young players that come in from the academy and just bring that bit of exuberance, and when they fly into a challenge, it gets everyone going. And I think Gillingham needs a little bit of that and something for the fans to get behind, and hopefully with Harris that can come. So something to be excited about.
Yeah, and even more so because with Jack Tucker potentially moving on, then there's going to be no one that's come through the youth team left. So if we can find one, then obviously it gives that connectivity between the terraces and the pitch, which is what Neil Harris has been beating the drum about ever since he arrived. So, right, before I let you go, briefly, excuse me, all the players that have been released, I just want a quick yes or no. Has the correct decision been made? Mustafa Carriol.
Okay.
Mustafa Carriol.
I'm gonna go no on this one actually, because I think he could have been an asset in League Two, but I get that there's fitness issues. But I think in short bursts, I think he can be a really effective player. But it's whether you want to take that chance on someone.
That's it. 33, missed the whole season. I can see why Neil Harris. For me, it's the correct decision. Unfortunately, Aaron Chapman.
There's a bit of surprise about that one. I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no. I think there is a bit of sort of background there. I think obviously Chappie, like Verdane Oliver, who come out and said that he wants to move back up north. I think Chapman's the same. I think he's got youngsters, young kids. So I think there's a bit of he wasn't sure. So we're just going to move on and we can plan quicker. Ryan Jackson.
Wow, this is a tough one. I'm gonna say no to that one again. Actually, I think he'd be a solid League Two right back.
Yeah, I was probably on the fence with this one. He's had there's been this weird symmetry with Jacko. He's had 2 spells of 2 seasons with us, and he's been really good in his first season each time, and then he's dropped off in the second campaign, had injury problems, missed more games, and we've struggled. I mean, 15, 16, really good under Justin Edinburgh, finished 9th, should have got in the playoffs, probably should have got promoted. 16, 17. Dropped off, stayed up on the final day. 19-20, really good, flirted with the playoffs. 2021 that was, sorry. And then 21-22, form dropped off, suffered with injuries, got relegated on the final day. It's a horrible pattern. So I can understand, again, it's understanding why Neil Harris has done it. but I wouldn't have been heartbroken if he was one of those players that had stayed on. Danny Lloyd, we've already spoken about. Ben Thompson.
Well, I think that's more a case of Ben Thompson wanting to move on somewhere else. I don't think that's a case of Neil Harris wanting to let him go. It's just that he probably thinks that he deserves to be playing higher than League Two. Which
I think that's
true,
it. I think there was probably an agreement in place that said, look, we'll have a chat at the end of the season. If we stay in League One, potentially it'd stay then. League Two, it ended that conversation before it had started. Verdane Oliver, we've already mentioned it was his own decision. We know that, and good luck to V. Christian Magoma, pretty straightforward. It just never worked out, unfortunately. Just quickly before we go, we've got about a minute and a half left by my timing before this Zoom interview cuts us off. Gerald Sitola and Harvey Lintop, both released, both youngsters, one a striker and one a right back. I think it's probably to do with Neil trying to get as much wages off the as much money off the wage bill so that he's got as much as he can have to get his own players in.
Yeah, I'm not